How do we come from being solely dependent upon this heroin to living a very decent life again someday? What are those steps? Do you have any ideas?
Yes, I've given a lot of thought to that, and there's some bad and some good, as often is the case in a scenario like that. The good is that we definitely can achieve this better world that you're talking about. There's no doubt in my mind about it. But the bad is that it's not going to happen quickly. Most people want a quick fix. They want to get this whole thing done by the next election. And usually that boils down to, well, who are you going to vote for? Most people don't want to take the long road to any place. They want the quick road. They say, all I want to do is vote. Tell me what candidate to vote for, and I'll do that, and then we'll fix everything. Doesn't work that way. The system has been corrupted at every level of society, not only in politics, but in education and the media, and to a large extent in the churches. I mean, everywhere you look, there's this collectivist mentality and this poison in the system, and you cannot get rid of that overnight. So what we're proposing to do, in fact, we've created an organization to be the spearhead for this movement. We call it Freedom Force International, and I urge anybody to go on the internet and look that up, see what it's all about, Freedom Force International. And what we're proposing to do is to take back control of the power centers of society, just the way we've lost them, one by one, recapture control of the political parties, recapture control of the labor unions and the church organizations and the school systems and the media centers and all of these power centers of society, which now are in the hands of collectivists who are pushing us down this path that we don't like. And until we have new leadership in these power centers of society, nothing is ever going to change, because these people are in the saddle. They're making the decisions. We write our letters to the congressman. We say, oh, Mr. Congressman, won't you please listen to us? Won't you follow the Constitution? Won't you please do what is right for a change? And they laugh at us. Yeah. We have to get new congressmen in there, new senators, new Supreme Court justices, and so forth. You know what I'm trying to say? That's going to take a long time, but it can be done. If we have the long view of history, then things look very rosy. But if we have the real short view, like the next election, they don't look too hot. What we want, as much, if not more, than knowing what we don't want. And I don't think it's enough. And I've mentioned this to Bob Schultz many times, and I think he agrees with me, but I don't think it's enough just to say support the Constitution until we are prepared to move forward and say, well, what does that mean? What does that mean to support the Constitution? What are the constitutional principles that we are supporting? I'm not just supporting a piece of paper, and as long as we have people interpreting the Constitution this way and that way, and then having disagreements and so forth, then we really don't know what we're supporting. So what I hope to see come out of this, and this, of course, is the main thrust of Freedom Force International, is to focus on the ideology of individualism. That's what the Constitution was, as I read it. And if we can even go beyond the Constitution and start talking about individualism and the concept of a protectorate as opposed to a government, in other words, a state that's there to protect our lives, liberty, and property, nothing more, not to govern us. A government is supposed to govern. Well, we don't want that. We don't want to be governed. We want to be protected by our state and so forth. This is where I want to see these discussions go, because as this movement builds, it'll be easy to get plenty of people mad about what's happened to the country, plenty of people mad at the Federal Reserve System, plenty of people mad at the congressmen and the senators and all of that, but will they know what to replace it with? And that's the critical issue, because we've seen tyrannies overthrown in history over and over again, where people have risen up and at great cost and treasure and blood, they've overthrown a tyrannical regime, and then lo and behold, they've replaced it with one just as bad, if not worse. And that's because they never focused on what they wanted. They were totally focused on what they didn't want. So I'm looking at this Continental Congress movement very favorably and very optimistically as a platform for being able to cause people to become united, if not on specific actions, at least become united on ideology, so that we can be all marching in step with each other ideologically, and each with our own uniqueness and our own issues and our own style, but still all in agreement as to where we're headed.
Right, and I agree 100%. I think you're right. We need to have an ultimate goal of where we want to see this country be. It's not enough just to tear down the existing system because it's rotten. You can't tear a bridge down because it's rotten and have absolutely no way to get across to the other side. You have to put an infrastructure a little along in order to facilitate an easy transition to something that can be palatable for years and years and centuries, hopefully, to come. So I applaud you, and I applaud your efforts, and not just the creature, but the many things that you've written. I really enjoy Freedom Force International, and I look forward to working with you very closely.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
Endeavor.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, anybody else that's interested in how this might play out, I encourage them to take a little time and come to the website for freedomforceinternational.org. And boy, is there enough to keep you busy reading there. First thing you want to start with is the Creed of Freedom. It's not very long. It takes just all written on one piece of paper, one page, one side. And that is the Creed. That's the positive objective that I believe, if everyone can sign on to that creed, and I've met very few people that couldn't, that we'd all be moving in the same direction and could build a much better system for the future.
Absolutely. One of my views on this, and one of the reasons that I like even the name and the idea behind Continental Congress, is that we're doing it again. I think, Mr. Griffin, we need a new generation to kind of have the debate again. At the founding of this country and the decision to declare independence from Great Britain, there was a discussion going on in the general populace of the American citizenry about what is the role of government in our lives, what are the principles that we believe in, and as you pointed out, I think those principles were ultimately determined by the Constitution to be individualism, that individual rights are supreme and important, and any time that you attempt to override an individual right in the name of the greater common good, you have failed, and government has failed, and society has failed. So it's kind of reminding ourselves once again, I think.
Well, I'm glad you see it that way, because that's certainly how I see it. And unfortunately, there is a large segment of our population today that doesn't, it's not that they have to rediscover these truths, because they've never been allowed to discover them in the first place. These issues and these topics have been stripped out of our schools and out of our history books decades ago. There was a time, if you go back and pick up some of those old history books 100 years ago, they're marvelous the way they talk about these things and the essence of freedom and why you should not turn over your rights to the group and so forth. And it's just marvelous. But boy, you won't find anything like that in the textbooks today, which are all passed upon by collectivists, mostly drawing from study guides issued by the United Nations to make sure that all schools are teaching internationalism and making sure that pride in country is no longer an issue, and all of these things. But so as a result, starting even with my generation, and I'm an old fogey now, but I didn't get much of this when I went through school. There was a little remnant of it, but when I look back at some of those older history books that were being read by my parents and my grandparents, I am just impressed by the depth of understanding and the scholarship and the statesmanship that was in them. We have to restore all of that. So the point I'm trying to make is there are a lot of people today, anybody from my age and younger, which is just about everybody, has got to discover these issues for the first time. It's not rediscovering them, but to learn a whole new way of thinking.
Absolutely, which is really an old way of thinking. The way
old way, yes.
Right.
Yeah,
the way that our founding fathers and the way that the citizenry felt. At the time, they wrote that document called the Constitution and the Declaration. These are some of the principles under which this country was founded that makes America so great that we just lost. And it's
Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. We'll talk to you soon, sir.
Okay, goodbye.